The Poison Tree by William Blake is most notably a part of his collection of the Songs of Experience. It is most notably referenced in pop culture for being between XXXTentacion's eyes as a symbol/tattoo. But before we even get into why people tattoo this symbol on them, let's talk about the actual poem itself and the meaning behind it. The poem itself is a part of the collection of the Songs of Experience, which is contrast to the Songs of Innocence. The Songs of Innocence celebrates the purity, joy, and the natural world of childhood, while Songs of Experience presents a darker, more cynical view shaped by social corruption, oppression, and the loss of that initial purity. The Poison Tree is a story about a man who holds deep resentment and anger towards his friend, which eventually leads him to murder. It uses the extended metaphor of a tree contrasting the destructive nature of repressed anger. The central theme is the danger of bottling up negative emotions, especially anger, which festers and grows when not communicated. Without further ado, here is the poem itself. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles, and with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew, both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. Now specifically, I'd like to talk about the daily watering of resentment, and how we practice it daily in society, and as well, even in your own interpersonal relationships possibly. In the day and age of social media and the ability to just block someone at a wit's end and the ability to just cut all contact without ever needing confrontation is a thing that is both amazing and absolutely terrible for our current state. And while, yes, it provides an amazing opportunity to get away from dangerous situations fast, it makes it all the while harder to resolve a very simple issue that might result in the death of somebody else. In psychology, suppressing your emotions is always seen as an unhealthy coping mechanism. In the same way the resentment and anger ate the man alive day by day, night by night in the poem, we distinctly see these same things within our own interpersonal relationships. Well, it might be either your friend who has held a deep resentment towards their parents, your one friend who can't let go of that anger towards their ex, or that one friend who can't stop talking about someone they used to be friends with in 6th grade. I wonder how much different our world would be if everyone communicated their emotions very distinctly. The social tropes that currently uphold most of our generation, the idea of nonchalantness, the idea of hiding your emotions, the idea of suppressing anger, the idea of suppressing depression, the idea of tucking everything away to prevent it messing up your image. Now, we may suppress things for a lot more different reasons than the man in this poem. Not everyone wants to kill someone, and certainly not everyone experiences homicidal ideation. Before we talk about why people resonate with this symbolism so much, let's talk about the actual symbol itself. Why is it a tree with no leaves? Removing the leaves strips the tree of superficial beauty, anything that would make it appealing to the eye, and more so, fruitful. Removing the leaves strips the tree of its beauty, leaving only the honest structure of past trauma, pain, toxicity, anger, resentment, and any other negative emotion that is stripping the tree of its life. And a leafless state also means that nothing is hidden. The raw core, the raw bark. A leafless state is true honesty. And it also means the dark root of one's inner conflicts are fully exposed to the elements, fully exposed to the air, almost like a cut that has had the band-aid ripped off very fastly. Trees themselves in symbolism are carriers of knowledge, death, or consequence in methodical context. To many, as a symbol or a tattoo, it serves as a permanent, honest warning to acknowledge dark inner feelings like resentment or anger so they do not secretly poison the mind. For some, it represents a transition, a detachment from such emotions, and a detachment from resentment that has been deep held within the person. Wallowing in such feelings can sometimes feel even fruitful or beneficiary depending on the environment and the reason for holding such resentment. For some, holding resentment means that the person will never forget what they did or about how they make people feel. Now, while that would make sense on paper, a lot of it mostly hurts the person holding the resentment more than the person the resentment is being held towards. I personally in my life have held lots of resentment towards lots of different people for lots of different reasons. I personally cope with this with solitude and keeping myself busy, but for a lot of people, that can do quite the opposite. For some people, being alone is less of a coping mechanism and more of an amplification, more of a reason to not keep going, a more reason to stop suppressing and start acting. And in the poem, it's almost like William Blake is telling you to express the anger and resentment that you hold towards your foe. But what exactly is expression? In this context, expression would usually mean just talking about it with your friend, talking it over, and resolving the problem. The word I would much rather use in this context is cultivation. Less a correction for the use of terminology, and more as an alternative for what is presented in the poem. Cultivation looks inward to build strength, wisdom, and peace. Building strength against what keeps you captive to anger can mean many things, but most of all, acquiring wisdom and acquiring peace are two of the main components to building strength. They almost work in this never-ending Ouroboros style triangle. Without wisdom, you cannot find peace. Without peace, you cannot find strength. And without wisdom, you cannot find either. Discipline, and the nature of having balanced harmony with other people, acts as a steady practice of self-improvement, obviously. But the inner conflict that comes with hating other people and not building patience or a self-discipline, a routine, a hobby you like, a thing you like researching, maybe a show you like, a book you read, all of these things contribute to building mental strength. However, in effect, you need a little bit both expression and cultivation. Some people would much prefer shouting and screaming their feelings and anything they may think into an empty void of opinions and different ways of thinking. Some people spend all day with their nose in self-help books, and others spend all day with their eyes on a screen watching some guy tell them how they should live their life. In reality, neither of these things are truly beneficial for the soul, for the mind, or physically. Because in reality, both of these things will leave you on your couch all day, either scrolling, reading, to find a solution you'll never find unless you look inward. But why is it that we can never find the solution? That is an interesting concept. A video I watched recently that I much enjoyed referring to similarly on this topic is "No amount of esoteric wisdom will fold your laundry for you." The YouTuber Kinzer Mind and Body uses this analogy to explain the difference between intaking information all at once and not being able to act on the few things that you actually need to do. You can have every idea of the universe, every idea of what social standards should be, everything wrong with society, everything wrong with your community, everything wrong with yourself, but if you can't do something as simple as fold your laundry, you've made zero progress. This usually is because us humans, we're very self-centered a lot of the time. We like feeling smart, we like feeling educated, we like feeling like we're making progress. But why is it that it's so hard to dedicate to these things? And I would like to think it's due to the amount of effort it takes, but it also takes effort to express how much information you're withholding and expressing all of these things consistently. It takes effort to constantly tell people how much you're improving. But with this effort, you could do something as simple as fold your laundry. And while having a conversation with someone about how much you're improving is not as close to as hard as doing something like fully reinventing your routine and your mindset. However, learning all these clinical terms, learning all these extravagant ways to express how much you've changed your life do require effort. And a lot of these things are used by people who have made zero progress and no real steps towards changing their life, their mindset, or anything they're withholding. The poison tree represents this in many ways, but most of all, it represents that letting this poison seep into your mind leaves you soulless, aka leaveless, and, most of all, lacking your beauty, what makes you you. Letting go of what you think defines you, mostly referred to as trauma, pain, toxicity, things that cloud your mind with poison, are more or less the things that were never you to begin with. They're mostly the actions of someone else, or they're simply events. Now, what defines you can mean a lot for a lot of people, but most certainly you, the body, the soul, and the mind are not the worst things you've experienced, your worst memories, the worst people you've interacted with, and the worst thoughts you had today.